It's Rob!
Tony! And I'm Jeff.
We're in gaming.
And that's you.
Hello gamers and welcome back to the Inn. I'm Rob, of course, or Warshack if you want to call me by my Hearthstone name. And today we're updating a video I should have updated a while ago, but I kind of forgot about it. Viewers brought it up in the comment section in some of my other videos saying, hey, can you update your most popular Hearthstone decks? Or the most popular Hearthstone decks. So with that, I've composed a list of all the popular Hearthstone decks that I can think of correlating to each class. So each class will have 1 to 3 decks that I think are the most popular you're going to find in ranked play. Again, I can't go over every single type and kind of deck that goes with each class. That would just be tedious, the videos would take a long time, and you guys would get bored. So I'm going to do the most popular. Not that some other decks aren't good. For example, Echo Mage is not in this video. The deck is good, and it is played on ladder, and it is a mage deck. But again, it is not popular. So that's why we're not going over it. So don't get your pants in a bunch if your deck that you like isn't brought up because it's not popular. And popularity... Okay. Face Hunter. This is a deck that if you have played Hearthstone, you've come into contact with it. It is probably the most known of the aggro decks, very cheap to build. The highest drop card in it is 3, and the point of this deck is to pump out as much damage in I almost said popularity. The most damage as possible in one turn. So whether or not it is ignoring everything on your opponent's side of the field, dumping your entire hand, or just using Huffer to go face, I don't even know what to say about this deck because it's so self-explanatory. It's just go face and you win. Very cheap to build, very effective. Probably not seen as much anymore because of Reno Jackson, but still a popular deck. Very easy to build. A lot of new players like it. With that, we're moving to another Hunter deck, and it is probably one of my favorite one of my favorite decks so far. It's the mid-range Hunter. It is I wouldn't say very similar to the aggro Hunter or face Hunter, but it is definitely has some tendencies of it, some being like, let's say, quick shots, the eagle horn bows, the animal companions, the kill commands, the ability to do large quantities of damage in one turn this deck also has, but it also has the ability to sustain itself with the Houndmasters, Pouted Treaders, the Ram Wrangler, which I like. You can play Ram Wrangler or Dr. Boom. Dr. Boom is definitely probably more used, but I like Ram Wrangler just because people don't expect it, and he makes for a really good 5-drop if you don't have Loatheb. And then the Savannah Highmane is definitely a card that makes this Hunter deck work really, really well because not only is it I don't even know what to say about it. It's like the Dr. 6 of the Hunter deck. So it's like, I wouldn't say it's as good as Mysterious Challenger because Mysterious Challenger is absolutely just fucking broken, which we'll get into later when I rant about the Secret Paladin deck. But it's definitely a very, very powerful 6-drop, which definitely helps the mid-range Hunter deck be able to sustain itself and not only be an early game deck. With that, we'll be moving over to the Mage decks, and we're going to start off with Freeze Mage, which is probably the least popular deck out of the decks we're going to go over. The entire purpose of this deck is to do a large quantity of damage, all of your health, in one turn by stalling the game and then being able to use Alexstrasza, bringing your health down to 15 or your opponent's, depending on who's playing the deck, and then you use a plethora of double Fireball, Frostbolt, or Frostbolt, a whole bunch of Ice Lances, Roaring Torch to be able to kill your opponent from their 15 health all the way to 0. So whether you play Alexstrasza or not, there's Archmage to back yourself up, so if you don't happen to draw the Alexstrasza, you can create more Fireballs with Archmage using the plethora of spells in the deck, and then you have the Blizzards and the Flame Strikes, the Cone of Colds, the Ice Blocks and the Ice Barriers, the Frost Novas and the Doomsayer to slow down the game, to give you the ability to get the cards you need over the course of the game to be able to do be able to have the spells to do the damage you need to do to win. So really fun deck, a little bit slower in my opinion for the meta right now. So if you're going against maybe an aggro shaman, which is on our list of decks that we're going to cover, it's very hard to keep up with how much damage that deck pumps out in one turn. But for the most part, this deck does very, very well against most matchups besides Control Warrior, which if you're playing Freeze Mage and you just go up against a Control Warrior, it's just bad luck. It's not because you suck or anything like that. It's just bad luck, and you're probably not going to win. But you can try. You always want to check, though, to see if it's maybe hold on one second. If it's maybe face warrior or something, so if so, then you actually do stand a chance. But if you know it's control warrior, it's probably going to be the Kansamida. Next, we're going against, or not going against, but going to bring up the Mech Mage deck. Very popular for the intermediate to beginner players. Very cheap to build, and it's very aggressive, and it's very effective at the ranks probably 6 to 15. Normally at the beginning of each season, you see a lot of Mech Mage because it does very well at climbing those ranks extremely quick. This is the deck list that I normally play at the beginning of each season, and then I stop playing it around rank 6 or 7, and then switch over to maybe some control decks and other stuff. So this deck revolves around being able to play pretty much a minion or a spell every single turn from turns 1 to 5, and then from there you either got the Loatheb, the Powder Shredder, the Archmage to kind of finish it off, or the Boom, and then you also have your Fireballs and your Frostbolts to be able to finish off the game with spells if they happen to bring up a lot of big taunts. There is no Flame Strike and Polymorph in this deck, which can be put in if you want, but for the most part this is normally the core build of this deck. Fel Reavers are also a thing, but because so many people are running Big Game Hunter and cards that easily remove that card, I've kind of replaced it with having Arcane Intellect, which allows this deck to not run out of steam after turn 4 or 5, which does help the deck out a lot. So again, the deck lists themselves are made by me. I'm not net decking any of these. Some of them are probably similar to net decks that were probably copied off me or somebody. But for deck building purposes, if you want to take this deck, that's fine. If you want to change it, it's fine. This is just like a general outline of each deck that I'm talking about. From there, we're going to go into the Tempo Mage. This is, I don't want to say it's exactly like Mech Mage because it's not, but it's very similar in the play style of being able to swarm the field very quickly and be able to pump out a lot of damage, again, very quickly. I would say the Tempo Mage is more RNG based than the Mech Mage is, and that's just because of the unstable portals and the Flame Waker, because the Flame Waker allows you to pump out massive amount of damage because it combos with a lot of your spells. So Flame Waker says every time or after you cast a spell, you can do 2 damage with him. So it's like an Arcane Missiles for 2 damage from Flame Waker every time you cast a spell. So you can imagine, let's say you have a Flame Waker and a Sorcerer's Apprentice out, and then you have 2 Arcane Missiles in your hand, or a double Frostbolt, or a double Fireball. You can do a lot of damage, and being able to cast a lot of spells in one turn because of the Sorcerer's Apprentice makes for some really mean combinations, and also the Archmage is also great because of how many spells you have in the deck. So this deck is, again, very fast-paced, and kind of fairly cheap to make as well. So definitely one of the more popular mage decks. I would have to say Tempo Mage is probably the most popular mage deck, followed by Mech, and then Freeze at the moment. Again, this is just my opinion. I don't have any stats to back me up. I play Hearthstone every day, and this is what I see. So just my opinion. From there, we're going to head into the Paladin decks. This is a deck that actually didn't exist a month or 2 ago, and I did not see coming to be, I didn't see it becoming a tier 1 or tier 2 deck, but it actually did. It's really good depending on who plays the deck, because I've seen Reynad and Kalento and Crip really play this deck out, and it worked very well for them. This is my build. It's a little bit outdated because currently there's no, I believe Sledge Belcher's been changed out. 2 Vigils go in the deck. You also put Keeper of Uldaman in here and Peacekeepers, so I would recommend looking up even a more updated version of this deck if you plan on playing the Murloc Paladin. But this deck worked really well for me when I was playing in Legend. And the entire purpose of this deck is to kill your opponent in one turn with anything that can happen. So the whole game, you stall it out with Wild Pyromancer, Equality, Consecration, maybe even Doomsayer if you put them in here. And then after your Murlocs have died, you anyfin, you fill your field with charged Murlocs, is why there's only 5 in the deck. There's the Bluegill Warriors that have charge, the old Murkai which has charge, and then the Murloc War Leader which buffs those guys. So you've got 3 minions that can charge, 2 of them that buff the chargers, and then from there you win. And if your first anyfin doesn't kill them, the second one surely will. And this also, anyfin, people have the misconception that it's only Murlocs that die on your side of the field. It's actually any Murloc that has died, period, anytime in the game on the field. So if your opponent played, you know, what's the 1-drop? McGurgle, and what's the 1-drop Murloc? Murgleton. Sorry, I was talking to Tony. McGurgleton. If your opponent plays Murgleton, then that is a possibility of a card, or one of the Murlocs that could come out of anyfin. So just keep that. Murloc Knight, but he's not really played in this deck because he doesn't have charge. He's a good card, he's a great Murloc.
They're playing, like mid-range.
Yeah. So if you're going against, let's say, a mid-range Paladin and they Murloc Knight, then anything can happen that can actually pull their Murloc that they played, not only yours. So heading into the, oh god, what the fuck's wrong with this deck list? Whoa, there we go. I'm sorry about that, guys. This is the Super Duper Cancer 2.5. This is my most recent rendition of the Secret Paladin. I have no idea why this deck list looks so shiny. But anyway, this is, I don't even want to go over this deck. If you watched any of my videos or know me at all, you know I hate Secret Paladin, but unfortunately it is a tier 1 deck right now. It's very good, very cheap to make. It's really consistent, which is really annoying because it's played by so many people. So if you're going against a Paladin deck, just assume it's going to be Secret, and if they don't play Secrets, then assume it's going to be mid-range, which we'll go over shortly, and if they don't play, if they play any Murlocs, again, whatsoever besides Murloc Knight, assume it's Murloc Paladin. So with this deck, it's just, I don't even, how do you explain this? It's just, they always get what they need. Divine Favor is normally in this deck. I don't run it with Divine Favor because if I'm going to play something Cancer, I'm not going to sprinkle more Cancer on top. It's just going to be Cancer as is, and then if, you know what I mean, I don't want to overly do it. But the deck wins due to, if you have Mysterious Challenger on turn 6, you win because it pulls out all your secrets, and yeah. So I don't even want to go over that deck. But anyway, it's a good deck. Cancer. All right, here's mid-range, which I recommend playing this deck over Secret Paladin because it is a lot more fun in my opinion, and actually requires you to somewhat pay attention to your field and use the combinations of your Silverhand recruits with your Quartermaster, so being able to time that out is pretty important. Effectively using your Keeper of Uldaman, whether aggressively or defensively, is also important, and just has a lot of CC, does very well against aggro decks, surprising because Muster for Battle, Shielded Minibot, Knife Jugglers, Zombie Chows, Consecration, all of these cards help really early game, and then your late game consists of, you know, being able to Quartermaster your Silverhands. In this deck list, I'm actually only running one Quartermaster, and that's because I've seen a lot of times versus the aggro matchup, you either draw one or two of these, and you're kind of just stuck with them in your hand because your Silverhand recruits don't really live long enough. You're not able to play True Heart to pump out the constant 2/1/1s every turn, and your Muster for Battle is something you use right away to get that field control, and your 1/1s don't live. So having one Quartermaster makes it so when you draw it, you're probably going to use it relatively soon. It doesn't sit in your hand too long, and then it also, your opponent, if you're playing, let's say, against a control matchup, they will play around you having Quartermaster all the time because they expect you to run two of them, but in actuality, you only have run one. So sometimes they'll actually I don't want to say overextend, but they'll overuse their cards to compensate for you using Quartermaster that you don't have. So they actually misplay themselves thinking that you're going to do the right play by play Quartermaster. I know I went into a little detail about one Quartermaster, but I know someone was going to say, mid-range Paladin with one Quartermaster, you fucking suck. And it's like, no, it's actually at a plan. That was a purpose. This deck normally wins not because of burst damage, but because of constant pressure on the field. The minions are big. They can become big again with Quartermaster. The weapons allow you to keep field control, and then you're able to heal yourself with Lay on Hands and the NT Killbot, just in case your weapons, you know, make you cause yourself more damage than you'd want. Sorry for the cut in the video, guys. I actually forgot to put Druid in the main video that we did, so I'm just going to have this little input here where I go over the two Druid decks that you're going to find often on ladder. If anything, you're going to find mid-range Druid as being the Druid deck you're going to find, you know, 80-90% of the time, followed by Rush Druid. We'll kind of go over both. I'm not going to make this too long because, again, I know the video was longer than I expected, but there's a lot of decks to cover, and I even forgot Druid, and it's still long, so we'll make this short. This deck, the winning combination of cards, you will see, you know, 70 to 80% of the time of your wins will be the Force of Nature Savage Roar for a 14 damage combo costing 9 mana. You can do up to 21 if you've got an Innervate, so you Innervate, double Savage Roar, Force of Nature, and then the entire rest of the deck revolves around you being able to get your opponent to that lethal range. So around turn 8 to 10, you're looking to have your opponent at anywhere between 10 to, you know, 14 to 16 health. Even if you're a couple points off lethal, normally you win the following turn because you've got some board control anyway. And the deck, the highest drop is a Dr. Boom, so you don't really need to worry about some of the bigger cards like Sonaris, KT. There's no Alexstrasza, so none of those really huge cards in the deck. 7 is as big as you're going to get. And then again, it has a pretty strong early game now because the Darnassus Aspirant, which was a really weak part of this deck prior to it obtaining early game with the Aspirate. So with that said, we're going to head over to Rush Druid. this is a very similar setup in a deck. You'll see pretty much, I don't say your win rate of Force of Nature Savage Roar and the Rush Druid won't be as much as the mid-range Druid, but you'll still win a lot with it. The pretty much win factor of this deck is being able to play a minion every single turn and attack with it, and then you're able to Savage Roar. So let's say you have 2 or 3 minions on the field by turn 4, using Savage Roar just to push out, you know, the extra 6 damage early game from that. You don't always have to combo it with the Savage Roar, the Force of Nature does really well. Also, the innervating out the Fel Reaver on turn, whether it be 1 or 3, is really powerful, because if your opponent doesn't have Big Game Hunter, even a Fireball doesn't take down the Fel Reaver right away. So if the Fel Reaver can make contact with their face even once or twice, along with all the other creatures you're going to be playing, this deck has a very hard time at losing the early game because of all these early game creatures. So I would say the Druid's best matchup, this and one in particular, is other Rush decks. I don't know why, but this Rush Druid does very well against other Rush decks. So if you're finding yourself playing a lot of other, fast-paced decks, whether it be Hunter, Zoo, Shaman, this deck does very well against those, which I found. So hopefully this input doesn't cost this video too much time. Back to the main video. Sorry about that. Next deck list, we will be heading over to the Priest deck. This is a very popular deck at the moment for Priest. It's the Entomb Priest, which I think has taken over kind of the Control Priest. So instead of Control Priest, you see renditions of Entomb Priest, which still basically run the same thing, the Soul Priests, the Shadow Priests, and all that good stuff. So this deck basically does very well against aggro decks, because you're able to have your early game consist of, double Holy Nova, you've got your Velen's Chosen, Zombie Chows, Power Ward Shields to make valuable trades, you've got your Soul Priest, Circle of Healing to clear the board, and then you use your Entomb to kind of take your opponent's big cards like Tyrion, Dr. Boom, Sylvanas, and they actually go in your deck. So it's like having those cards in your deck, and you can change it every game because you're entombing different cards. So it actually works really well, better than I expected, because I was like, oh my god, you're not running Dr. Boom in this deck? It's like, you don't need to, because you just take theirs. And it only costs 6 mana, so it's not like Dr. Boom costs 7, so you're actually saving 1 mana there. If they play Tyrion, you're saving 2 mana. So most of the time, you want to entomb something that costs 6 or more to get the value out of it. But like, let's say they played a Sledge Belcher and you're pushing lethal, just entomb the Sledge Belcher and then, of course, win the game. Don't be scared to use entomb on creatures. That'll stop you from winning. From there, that's pretty much, the deck is, I would say, pretty hard to play, to be honest. It's a little bit more expensive because Entomb does come in, I believe, the later sections of the League of Explorers. The Juskar True Heart's an epic, and the Shadow Priest, the Light Bomb, and whatnot are epics. Also, the Lightbane and Darkbane are just my renditions of the deck. You can play, Deathlord instead, or you can play Injured Blade Master. All of those are fine options. I just really like Darkbane and Lightbane due to the fact that you can Power Ward Shield them and Velen's Chosen them, and it makes your opponent wonder, like, what kind of rendition of Priest is he playing, because most people do not play those cards. So I like to put a little twist in my decks, and yeah, so if you have any questions, that's why I have those in there. I would say the most popular Priest deck is Dragon Priest, followed by Entomb. It's probably actually pretty close, maybe even 50-50 in how often you'll see each deck. But I seem to come across Dragon a little bit more than Entomb, in my opinion. So Dragon Priest, as you can assume, it runs dragons. In my Dragon Priest, I actually threw in Entomb, so it does have a really powerful control factor in it, being able to run double Light Bomb, double Entomb, and double Holy Nova. So it does very well against aggro. It holds its own against control, and it does a good amount of damage through the Drakes it has in its deck, along with being able to take their cards with Cabal Shadow Priest. So in my opinion, this is a very powerful deck at the moment in ladder. If you enjoy Priest and you want to play a pretty powerful deck and you haven't run Dragon Priest before, I recommend trying this deck list out. It's the one I'm currently running at the moment, and so far I've climbed, I believe, from rank 8 to rank 5 with it in just a couple hours. And this is kind of, I don't play Priest often, I am no Priest pro, but it seems to be doing really well. So that's that. This deck does not revolve around burst damage. It revolves around you being able to control the field and deal a good amount of continuous damage over the course of the game. So don't be confused with, like, let's say Priest decks and Tempo Mage, because Tempo Mage can, 15, 20 damage in a turn is nothing, but, doing 6 burst damage with a priest is good. So it's just depending on what kind of deck you're playing and what you're really going for. From there, we're going to head on over to the rogue decks. I actually only have one rogue deck here, and that's because rogue is probably the most least played class right now. And if you play rogue, you're most likely going to be playing against somebody playing oil rogue. And if they're playing, you know, Malagos rogue or Miracle rogue or whatever kind of rogue or Raptor rogue, it is very uncommon. So I'm not going to go over, again, those decks because you just don't see them that often, and I don't want to waste your time. And also the builds on them are really, really different. Some people could go, you know, control Raptor Rogue or aggro Raptor Rogue. So I don't want to lead you in the wrong direction with those kind of things. Oil Rogue, this is a deck that has been around for a while, really hasn't changed much, besides maybe adding the Tomb Pillagers in instead of the Piloted Shredders, but again, they're interchangeable. It doesn't make that big of a difference. This deck does a lot of damage in one turn, so you always have to be careful from rogues being able to pump out anywhere between 15 to 25 damage in one turn once they get the cards needed to fulfill their combo. Very hard deck to play in my opinion. I personally suck at rogue, so I don't even want to start talking about combos and what you do and don't need to do, because it's not good. I started off with playing Pirate Rogue is how I began playing the class, because I figured, you know, baby steps. And then from Pirate, I played I attempted to make a deck guide on Oil Rogue. It did all right, but again, I am no pro Rogue. I don't even want to talk about it. I do all right. I make minimum wage at it. All right, so with that, we're going to talk about the Shaman class. Again, there's only one Shaman deck list that seems to be very prominent, very popular, very effective, and very consistent right now, and that's going to be the Aggro Shaman. This is my updated deck list of the Aggro Shaman. So for those of you who are who watched my Aggro Shaman deck list and are wondering why this isn't the same, I actually haven't done my deck guide on this one yet. So if you're watching this, you're ahead of the game. This is a really good deck right now to play. Yes, it is pure cancer. Yes, it is disgustingly OP, and it's a lot of players don't actually run the Piloted Shredder, but I like it because it allows you to make for a nice turn 4 play for the most part. Don't call me right now. And yeah, if you're looking to play a pretty cheap, effective deck, Aggro Shaman is here. There's also Malagos Shaman, and Dragon Shaman. Again, you might see them once in a blue moon, but I don't want to go over them because I don't want to, you know, all the new players are like, holy shit, there's so many decks. I don't want to freak you guys out too much. You know, I could list out 100 decks that are in this game that you could possibly see, but there's really no point. This is pretty much 80 to 90% of the decks you're going to see as of now, and this is January. Fuck you. Hold on. There's a date in here. January the 27th, 2016. Thank you, Apple Watch, for taking forever. Anyway, we're going to move on to the Warlock deck. There's actually quite a few really good Warlock decks as of now, so I'm going to cover each one. We've got the Reno Lock 2.0. I have not done my deck guide on this. You will see my original Reno Lock, which will be slightly different, but it runs basically the same. The entire point of this deck is it has a really beautiful curve. You're pretty much able to play something every single turn from turn 1. If not, you definitely did not get a good hand, or just having bad luck. Sometimes you just draw terrible an entire day in Hearthstone. You just lose every game, and it's happened to everybody. So the point of this deck is to pretty much, I wouldn't say have complete board control the entire time, but you're able to put out a decent amount of creatures over the course of the game, and then if you're playing against an aggro deck, they'll get you low fairly quickly. You know, turns 4 to 7, they'll probably get you down in like the 10 sub range, and then you just Reno Jackson, and then they concede. So this is actually a deck that works really well against aggro decks and along with the control decks, because there's a good amount of high drop creatures in it, such as like Loatheb, Sludge Belcher, Emperor, Sylvanas, Dr. Boom, Mal'Ganis. There's just tons of ways to operate around control and aggro decks with this. So really fun, really good deck. This is the deck list I actually hit Legend with last season in December of 2015. So if you guys want to try this deck out, it does very, very well. From here, we're going, I'm going to try to speed this up a little bit. This video is going to be long as fuck. I'm sorry, guys. There's just a lot to talk about. I wish I could talk about more, but yeah. Anyway, we're going on to Zoo. This is the most current rendition of Zoo 2.0 I have. This is very similar to our, like, let's say, aggro or face hunter. It's to do as much damage as possible by filling up the field with cards. You see the Curse of Rafam and the no Void Caller. This is because I have found that this takes your opponent off guard. Normally when you play zoo decks, the deck list of zoo decks are relatively all the same. So with that, they kind of can expect what you do, but running Curse of Raphams, Fist of Jaraxxus, only one Implosion, and a Hellfire really takes them off guard, and you're able to kind of play around them because you know what they're playing, but them playing around you is a little bit more difficult. So yeah, this actually did very well for me playing Legend last season as well. Heading down into another not so popular at the moment Warlock deck, but a deck that is played by a decent amount of players who play Warlock without a doubt, is the Handlock. This deck has been around pretty much since the beginning of Hearthstone. It hasn't really changed that much. The Ogre Brute may be a little bit outdated. I believe I grabbed the, not wrong deck list, but one of the older deck lists I have of this, but the core is pretty much the same. The double Molten Giants, the Twilight Drakes, the Siphon Souls, and the Sylvanas. It's double Shadow Flame, probably 2 Hellfires instead of the one that's listed here. The deck is a little bit too slow in my opinion right now, but the win condition of this deck is just to fill up the field with a bunch of 8/8s, give them taunt, and your opponent can't get through them. But unfortunately, because of aggro Shaman, this deck just gets destroyed because it's just too slow. By the time you play a creature on turn 4, you're already at 10-15 health, and then you just get double Lava Burst down or Lava Burst Crackle for the game. So yeah, not really seen that much, but it's definitely a deck that you will see no matter what. This is a deck that's actually popping up more than I thought it would, and that's going to be Face Warrior. I don't have McGurgleton in this deck yet, but he will be going in here, and this is going to be Face Warrior. It's pretty much the same thing as Face Hunter. It's to do as much damage as possible, but the upside of Warrior is that you have the ability to do a lot of damage through your weapons, which Hunters do have weapons like Glaive Zuka and Eagle Horn Bow, but Warriors have, you know, Arcane Reaper and Death Spite, which are better. So you're able to do an Heroic Strike, which is absolutely retarded. You throw down, you know, Arcane Reaper for 5, and then you Heroic Strike, and you can do 9 damage with 7 mana one turn, and it's just insane. So yeah, basically follows the same route as the Face Hunter. Almost done, guys, almost done. All right, so Control Warrior is probably the most popular warrior right now. Maybe Reno, and I wouldn't say, I was thinking about putting Reno Jackson Warrior in here, but again, it's not that popular. It is on ladder, but I wouldn't say it's as popular as Control, Face, and things like that. So the win condition of this deck is to basically be able to survive the early game with your War Axe, your Revenge, your Slams, your Armor Smiths, your Bash. You're able to draw with the Alkalite of Pain because this deck does lack the draw potential. So you're comboing your Death Spite with your Alkalite and your... there's no Taskmaster in here. I wonder which deck list. This might be... This might be one of my older deck lists, but Taskmaster is normally found in this deck as well, and he combos well with the Acolyte. And then you pretty much win, whether it be a fatigue battle with the True Heart because you're able to gain 4 armor each turn, or you're just able to combo them with, you know, Death Spite, Growmash, or just the plethora of huge creatures you have in this deck. As soon as you make it to turn 5 with this deck, for the most part, the rest of the game is just you playing big creature after big creature after big creature, being able to remove their stuff with executes and shield slams. Granted, this deck does take a lot of dust to build. This is a very expensive deck, but it does very well, and it's proven itself over the course of time because it still remains in the top tiers of decks, and it hasn't really moved from there. I think it's like tier 1. I know it's not tier 1, but I know it's sitting at tier 2, and it used to be tier 1. So definitely a deck that has proved it's very consistent, and it does very well. And then moving to our last deck that we have, and the last warrior deck we have, and that is Patron. This is the Patron deck I made after the nerf of Warsong Commander, and I haven't updated it since. I know the Elite is found in this deck now, and some other cards that people have changed out that have found, or that have made their way into this deck that have proven to be better than my setup here. But this deck list still should treat you right if you want to use this. If not, look up a more updated version of the Patron deck. But surprisingly, after they nerfed Warsong Commander, Grim Patron is still a thing, even though it can't attack right away. it's still good. And the Frothing Berserker, again, it can't combo you with 40 damage in one turn, but it's still, you know, it's a 3-drop that your opponent's going to have to waste a CC or some card to get rid of. The win condition of this deck is pretty much fill your field with Grim Patrons as fast as possible if you're playing a deck like a Druid who can't really deal with them, and or you'll just win basically just attacking their face, whether it be through Despite, Berserkers, Patrons, Dr. Boom, or your Hell Screening with the, where is it? The Despite combo. So like, let's say, for those of you who aren't so familiar with the Warrior deck, and a win condition you'll have a lot is when the Despite has 1 charge left and you attack with it, it'll deal 1 damage to everything on the field. So if you have 1 charge with your Despite, you can play a Hell Scream, you attack their face with the Despite, it does the AoE damage, hits everything on the field for 1, and then since it hits everything on the field for 1, Hell Scream gets enraged and he can do 10 damage. So that's a 14 damage combo, which is half someone's life in 1 turn by using that little combo there, and not counting, you know, how much damage you've done previously in the game, along with other creatures you may or may not have on the field. So this covers the most popular decks in Hearthstone right now. If I left anything out or I didn't touch on a deck you think I should have, let me know in the comment section below, and in my next version of this video I will have those in there. But again, there's no way for me to cover every single deck that Hearthstone has right now. I just want to cover the most popular ones, the ones that new players will see 80% of the time on ladder, and kind of go over each one like I did and talk about their win conditions and what they're about. So with that said, hopefully you've enjoyed this video. Again, let me know in the comment section below what you guys think. These videos are, again, for you and to help you. So if these aren't helping you, let me know. And if you're looking for something else, also let me know. Always looking for new video ideas. With that said, of course, guys, I'm Warshack, and happy whatever the hell day it is.